Hey guys, welcome back to the studio for another lesson. This week, we're going to be digging into a concept that's super important for playing great sounding improvised solos, voice leading. To help you guys understand how the concept works and how to practice it, we'll first go through a brief explanation of what voice leading means when we're playing single note lines. Then I'll give you an example of how we can play a simple melodic pathway through the changes to the standard It Could Happen to You. Once we've got an idea of how we can move through those chord changes in a smooth way, I'll show you how to start filling in lines around the points of resolution that we're focusing on. Finally, we'll wrap up the lesson with an etude over those chord changes that can serve as an example for how you can completely fill up the space between resolutions with all sorts of different bebop language we've covered in the past. You guys ready? Let's get into it. We've talked about voice leading a couple of times before in the context of playing accompaniment. When we're playing a single note line, especially an improvised solo, there's a bit more to consider when thinking about voice leading. Before we get into all the nitty-gritty though, we should understand the basic concept. Just like when we're playing chords, we want to move as little as possible between changes in order to make the motion sound smooth. Now, the most common way we can go about doing this is by using the guide tones of a chord. Here's a quick example for you to think about. If we're playing a 2-5-1 in B-flat major, then the smoothest possible motion is going to take us from a B-flat, which is the 7th of the 2 chord, to an A, the 3rd of the 5 chord. Then, when we resolve to our 1 chord, we just stay on that A. See, we don't always need to move to make good voice leading happen and to play in a way that gets at the core of a harmonic movement. We can then flip that order of operations and start on the E flat, which is the 3rd of the 2 chord, stay on that note while it becomes the 7th of the 5 chord, and then nicely resolve down to a D, which functions as the 3rd of our 1 chord. Now, these are some of the most effective and cogent sounding things that we can lean into when we're playing a solo over chord changes. However, we also have lots of other options that we hear all the time in great jazz solos. If we expand our thinking a bit, we can get even more beautiful resolutions in the context of that same 2-5 that we can then apply to a whole host of other harmonic movements. Here's an example of a few of my favorite voice leading pathways to play around with over a 2-5-1 in B-flat. Now, to keep things simple, we'll just do half notes so you can clearly hear how things move from one chord to the next. When we're playing an improvised solo, we obviously won't be sticking to such a rigid half-note rhythm. These are just some of the ways that I like to think about leading a line through the harmony of a chord change like this. My goal is usually to start on a consonant note and then play some kind of tension over the dominant and then release that tension by resolving into a consonant-sounding note from the tonic. Up next, I'll take you through an outline of what I hear as a possible route through the changes to It Could Happen to You, and then we'll work on filling up the space with bebop language while maintaining the overall voice leading structure. When I play a solo over a tune from the American Songbook, I'm typically hearing some kind of simple melodic line that moves through the harmony in small steps from chord to chord. This sort of thing doesn't really have a textbook vocabulary term, but for our purposes today, we can refer to it as a voice leading pathway or voice leading line. The idea is that my lines are centered around some overarching shape that closely follows the harmony of the tune. The shape should be a pretty and interesting, but rhythmically simple line all on its own. To give you guys an idea of my thought process behind practicing this, check out this example I've written out for you over the changes to It Could Happen. Obviously, this is just one possible route you could take through the changes while thinking like this. Now, before we go on about filling in spaces, we should first explore how we can add some rhythmic interest to this pathway. Up next, the structure and note choice is going to be exactly the same, but in this example, I'll vary the rhythm slightly. In practice, this should help to kickstart your thinking and help you to hear how you could potentially start filling in lines around or based on the voice leading structure that we've set down. Here's how it sounds. Another tactic we can try to get our ears involved in the process is to treat the second note in each measure as an appoggiatura that we can approach by a leap from another chord tone or scale note and then resolve into the following measure by step. This is also a twofold exercise in that we'll essentially be moving a rhythmic motif through the entire set of changes. Follow along with this exercise and I think you'll see what I mean. I think this is already starting to sound pretty good and would actually make a decent opening to a longer improvised solo. Up next, we'll take a small section of the changes and see how we can start using this type of thought process to fill in our lines while still maintaining the voice leading structure. Before we get to that though, I need to give a quick shout out to TRUEFIRE.com for supporting the channel. TRUEFIRE is an online lesson library that's host to literally thousands of courses on a wide range of musical topics from some really amazing artists and educators, including yours truly. If you're interested in improving your comping, make sure to check out my course, Exploring Melodic Jazz Comping, available on TRUEFIRE now. In this course, I'll demonstrate and break down 17 essential comping approaches using TRUEFIRE's interactive learning tools. We'll work on crafting more sophisticated comping parts using drop-2 voicing, chord substitutions, approach chords, diminished concepts, and voice leading. We'll also dive into triadic approaches, partial chords, using scales as chords, and the art of borrowing notes and dominants. You'll learn how these melodic comping approaches can be artistically applied using backing tracks based on the changes to popular jazz standards like Autumn Leaves, There'll Never Be Another You, and All the Things You Are. The link to the course is in the description of this video. Now, let's get back to the lesson and check out how we can start filling up our lines with some bebop language. When we're practicing our voice leading this way, we can use the melodic pathway we've been exploring as a springboard for filling in lines. I think you can do this in two main ways. First, we can use the voice leading line as the starting point and fill in around it as interruptions or flourishes to the structure. The other way would be to use the melodic pathway as points of resolution that we need to land on. Both of these strategies present pretty unique challenges and can really help you work on your improvisations while maintaining a melodic through line in the changes. Here's an example for you to check out over the A section of It Could Happen that makes use of both strategies. To make sure you can spot the voice leading line at the core of this example, I've highlighted the notes pulled from a simple melodic pathway I showed you in the previous section. Here's what that sounds like now. today's lesson, I've written out a ton of other examples like this over another voice leading line that we didn't have a chance to get to today. So if you're looking for more material to help you make sense of practicing voice leading single note lines, make sure you head on over to my Patreon page and check that out. To wrap things up for today, though, I want to show you an example of how this sort of practice can sound when expanded out to the entire set of changes. In this etude, I've used the same voice leading line from the previous section as a springboard and filled in around and between it with bebop language. Now, just like in the short example we just went over, I've highlighted the core melodic line so you can see how it all fits together. When you're working your way through this, see if you can keep the voice leading line in your ear, or even try singing it while you play the etude if you want a serious challenge. Here's the etude for you to take a listen to now. Thanks so much for sticking around all the way to the end of the video. I hope I've been able to offer up some clarity on not only what voice leading means when we're playing single note solos, but some effective and fun ways that you can practice incorporating it into your lines. Let me know in the comments if there are any ways that you've learned to practice voice leading lines that I didn't cover today. As always, if you did find today's lesson helpful, make sure you give the video a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that bell for notifications too. If you want to access the PDF for today's lesson, you can grab that along with the whole back catalog for all the videos on the channel for as little as $10 a month over at my Patreon page, or by just hitting the join button right here on YouTube. A special thanks goes out to Ron Maestas, Alf Collins, Juan Doming, Ruthenio Fiuza, and Carlos Fernandez for being studio fans. I really appreciate the support. An extra special thanks is due to these studio members for their support as well. Johnny Stocks, Bertrand Chesnay, Paul Marin, Andy, James O'Connor, S. Bruce 1234, Thomas Kletchafore, Martin Weigers, Robert Muldowney, Mark Eslick, Carol, Robert Allaire, Daniel Alvarenga, Robert Cody, Alma Rainey, Lambert, Gregory Chu, Vaughn Davis, Nick Hess, Louis Maiden, Brendan Kelly, T. Colston, Andrew McBride, Aldo Fonseca, Jason Paul Dubois, Ron Askew, Raymond DeGloro, James Seabury, Bruce Wood, Bill Benfield, Sean Lepore, Stephen White, Salkai Zoltan, Apollos Juliver, Justin Fisher, Milan de Kaiser, David Wortman, Zia Soares, Artie Sanchez, Louis Rosen, Stephen Prager, Skemster, Everton Armstrong, Stephen Schwartz, Max Irwin, David Zuckerbraun, and PH. An extra special shout out to Jazz Luminaire patron, Bill Jacob. Thank you guys all so much for your continued support. I'm David Shore, and thanks again for hanging out with me at the studio today. I'll see you guys next time.